In Arlington National Cemetery lays Lieutenant General Claire Lee Chennault, whose tombstone is engraved with a line of Chinese characters. Chennault retired from the U.S. Army for the first time in his 40s as a major at the age of 64, 9 days before he passed away. He was promoted to the honorary rank of Lieutenant General in the U.S. Air Force. What's the story behind this remarkable man? Let's dive right in. Born on September 6, 1893, in Commerce, Texas, Claire Chennault joined the military and learned to fly during World War I. He was a fierce advocate of fighter interceptor aircraft during the 1930s, when the Air Force was focused on primarily high-altitude bombardment. Then, in April 1937, due to poor health and disputes with superiors, Chennault retired from the United States Army in his 40s. His life journey to that point did not make him a legend as the world sees him. It is what happened after retired for the first time that did. 1 month later, he arrived in China. So what's going on in China in 1937? World War II. The Pearl Harbor attack was still 4 years away, which means the U.S. wasn't officially part of the war. In Asia, however, the war started on July 7, 1937, marked by the Marco Polo Bridge incident. How did Chennault get involved in China's warfare? The story starts with Song Meiling, known to many Americans as Madame Zhang Jieshi. She was the wife of Zhang Jieshi, the president of China at that time. She played an instrumental role in forging the relationship between China and the U.S. The Japanese military had been occupying the northwest of China since 1931 with sporadic guerrilla battles. It just wasn't a full-blown war yet. President Zhang Jieshi and his leadership team knew that a war between China and Japan was inevitable. Against this backdrop, Song Meiling reached out to Chennault, basically saying, "I know your know-how in the sky. Come to China and help us build our Air Force." Chennault arrived in China in June 1937 on a 3-month contract with a salary of $1,000 per month, a very handsome salary. He was tasked with surveying the Chinese Air Force, checking out air bases and facilities, and devising a plan to ramp up China's Air Force. 1 month later, with the outbreak of the Marco Polo Bridge incident, China declared war against the Imperial Japan. Chennault stayed and became Zhang Jieshi's chief air advisor, assist in training Chinese Air Force pilots, advising on the construction of Wujiaba Airport, and setting up an air raid warning system. His duty also included organizing a squad of mercenary pilots. From the war's onset, the Japanese had the upper hand due to their superior weaponry. Most battles occurred in the east, prompting a massive migration of civilians and military personnel to the west. It would take time for the Japanese troops to catch up, thanks to the vastness of the land. Japan's, however, tactic was to bomb the west mercilessly. On September 13, 1940, a landslide lost in a battle over skies of Chongqing, the wartime capital of China, made the situation desperate. President Zhang Jieshi sent Chennault to Washington to persuade President Roosevelt to help China. The good news came. The Lend-Lease Act was approved by the U.S. Congress, including China as a recipient of aid. Among the aid were 100 P-40C airplanes, initially given to the UK and then transferred to China. These planes were crucial in ramping up China's Air Force. President Roosevelt also signed an executive order allowing U.S. military veterans and reservists to join China's fight against Japan, With everything in place, on July 11th, 1941, 110 volunteer pilots and 150 mechanics recruited by Chennault set out for China from San Francisco. 1 month later, the American volunteer group AVG was officially founded. The AVG were official members of the China Air Force, organized into 3 squads: Adam and Eve's, Panda Bears, and Hells Angels. Back then, painting airplanes was a thing. One of Chennault's pilots, David Hill, suggested painting sharks on the planes, as Japan, an island country, might fear sharks. However, people in southwest of China, where AVG planes mostly flew, had never seen a shark. When locals saw the painted planes, they recognized them as fierce animals, likening them to tigers. Thus, the Flying Tigers were born. The AVG's main duty was to protect the Burma Road, the only land route for American supplies to China. On December 20, 1941, in their first combat, the Flying Tigers shot down 9 out of 10 Japanese bombers, losing only 1 AVG aircraft. 3 days later, another landslide victory over Rangoon Sky earned the Flying Tigers glory and fame. Chennault and his Flying Tigers made headlines worldwide, and Walt Disney Company designed logos for them. The local people loved the Flying Tigers. President Jiang issued a special broadsheet to the AVG Flying Tigers, which they sewed onto their bomber jackets. The Chinese characters read, "This foreign person has come to China to help in the war effort. Soldiers and civilians, one and all, should rescue and protect him." According to one of the Flying Tigers, Eric Schilling, he crash-landed in a local village and encountered local villagers. After realizing Schilling was American instead of Japanese, note that locals had never seen American or Japanese. The tense atmosphere quickly turned into a joyful celebration of friendship. The villagers built a wheelchair to carry Schilling around, and they squabbled over whose turn to carry Schilling. 1 year into its operation, the AVG era ended for a good reason. As the U.S. officially joined the war and became allies with China, it made sense to induct the AVG into the U.S. Air Force. The AVG was disbanded on July 4, 1942, simultaneous with the activation of the 23rd Fighter Group, also known as the China Air Task Force, part of the 10th Air Force. Chennault was promoted to Brigadier General and led the 23rd Fighter Group. Its personnel was offered USAAF commissions, but only 5 of the AVG pilots accepted. The transition was somewhat unpleasant, as the pilots were not treated as pioneers fighting the war ahead of time. The remainder of the AVG pilots became civilian transport pilots in China, returned to America, or joined other military services and fought somewhere else in the war. During the AVG era, the Flying Tigers shot down 296 enemy aircraft, while losing only 14 pilots in combat. The Flying Tigers' legacy lived on, with military, local Chinese, and the media still referring to the American Air Force presence in China as the Flying Tigers. Transitioning into the CATF, its mission was to defend the aerial supply operation over the Himalayan mountains between India and China, nicknamed the Hump, and to provide air support for Chinese ground forces and attack Japanese airplanes. On May 20, 1942, the Japanese gained control of Burma, cutting off the land route to China. The only way for American supplies to reach China was through the air, making the CATF's job vital. In the 9 months of its existence, the China Air Task Force shot down 149 Japanese airplanes plus 85 probables, with a loss of only 14 P-40s. On March 19, 1943, the CATF got an upgrade. The 14th Air Force was established by the special order of President Roosevelt. The CATF was transformed into 14th Air Force with Chennault, now a major general, still in command. It now had over 2,000 personnel and 170 aircraft. By the end of the war, they were credited with shooting down over 2,600 airplanes. Things were looking great for the Allies, and the final success was on the horizon. Most of us would expected a happy ending for Chennault. However, things took a turn. Politics intervened. The highest commander of all U.S. forces in China, Burma, and India was General Stilwell, who also served as a military advisor to President Chiang Kai-shek. Stilwell and Jiang passionately disliked each other, despite working closely. Stilwell and Chennault despised each other, and Jiang and Chennault shared a special bond, no doubt. Due to Jiang's insistence, President Roosevelt replaced Stilwell with General Albert Cody Wedemeyer. Amidst all this, Chennault resigned and left China just days before Japan's surrender. Chennault was treated as a hero when he left China, and upon returning home to America, he was hailed again as a hero. He was promoted to the honorary rank of Lieutenant General in the U.S. Air Force on July 18, 1958, 9 days before his passing on July 27th at the Oxner Foundation Hospital in New Orleans. On May 3, 1991, the U.S. Department of Defense finally recognized the AVG as a covert government operation, acknowledging its personnel as U.S. war veterans. On July 26, 1999, the Flying Tigers were inducted into the United States Air Force Hall of Fame.